Right, we are live. Here we go.
We are live, number 38. Cody Steinman, Ryan McCracken, here today with Michael Regan. We just totally broke the podcast tradition, and we had lunch. So this is almost like part 2 of our podcast that nobody else gets to hear part 1 of. Dude, thanks for coming on. It was an honor to have you reach out and say, hey, or your assistant reach out and say, hey, I want to come on the show. You're just coming back from your Building Champions conference, quarterly conference.
That is right? True. That is true.
So we talked about this a little bit at our lunch, but it's been kind of a private goal of mine to work so hard and let my work-life balance get so out of whack that I need Building Champions to bring it back into but we talked about kind of what Building Champions is. So.
Ryan, is this how it's going to work? We start in a very deep hole and we just work our way up from there.
Exactly.
All right, got it.
So how was your conference? Maybe talk a little bit about what Building Champions is for people that aren't listening. Coaching's been a big theme on this podcast. It's been a big part of Ryan and my business. And so maybe talk a little bit about Building Champions.
Well, our company has been in existence for 23 years. But founded by Daniel Harkavy out of the mortgage lending industry. So I think a lot of folks in mortgage lending are well aware of who we are historically because we've been super invested in this industry for a long time. But interestingly, in the last decade, we've really diversified our coaching offering to industries well outside of mortgage banking and real estate. It's been a great diversification play. But it's funny, you talked about the Masters Coach, the event we just had up in Seattle. That is somewhat of our signature program. Been running that program for 21 years. This is our 22nd year of running that program. And it is high performance leaders in the mortgage lending space. So some of them are in management leadership, some are in production leadership. But everybody in that group is deeply entrenched in the industry. So I just got back from pouring myself into time with some high-performance people there and had a great time.
So that's every quarter, right?
We meet quarterly.
And a lot of these events for company sales rallies and coaching events are annual. Do you find that there's an advantage to do it quarterly?
So the program is certainly geared for someone who's in a position where they're making a high level of investment to be in this program. Both
Financial
and time.
Okay.
I think both. And so they're looking for a higher level of value than they might get in a large room conference setting. They're looking for an opportunity to be with people that they get to know really well, that they feel comfortable letting their guard down a little bit with. It's interesting to be in a room full of folks that have brands that you think are all competing, but the egos get checked at the door. And we're not there to recruit each other. We're not there to steal things from each other. I think these are abundantly minded folks that come into that program who look at the bigger picture and say, hey, the real enemies are outside of the groups that we work with. Let's actually work hard to get better and keep some of those other enemies at bay. So very abundantly minded folks who I think, again, make that investment of time and of money intentionally. They want that deeper value.
Well, we've had several of our past guests are Building Champions clients. Ken Perry, Patrick Palmer, and Tony Blodgett, I think, are the 3 that come to mind.
So
all very A players in their...
And myself.
Someday, Ryan.
No, I wasn't.
So
I wasn't a coach, but
oh, you were.
I was in the Building Champions program.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, back in the day.
Little known fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you other than to say all 3 of those guys with us together over the last 2.5 days, just solid dudes. Absolutely.
So was there a theme this time around?
So when we're working with a room, imagine the audience, right? You've got folks that run companies, folks that run large regions, folks that run, let's say, local markets, maybe even at a branch leadership level, all the way down to team leaders. It's a pretty wide mix. So the advantage of that is that you get a lot of diversity in the room in terms of where you can go. The difficulty is when you come up with a theme is how do you hit the target with that wide of an audience? What we've agreed upon this year is our focus, and we told them up front, hey, if you're going to be in the program this year, be committed to the idea that we're going to bring a high level of focus on growing production. So our theme this year was around, or I'm sorry, our last event was around people and process. And so we dug into some resources specifically to help folks identify where they can invest more in their people and where they can invest more in their process. But the overarching theme for the year is growing production.
And is that theme timed kind of with where a lot of people are at in their business, with how well the economy is doing, with how much change is going on with technology, AI, all this stuff? Is that kind of where that theme grew out of?
We definitely try to listen and observe to the reality of the industry around us. We don't want to be myopic. I think it would be a big mistake if we just got kind of branded the life planning guys. And, well, that's just what those guys like to do, so that's the same theme every time. In fact, we recognize that a lot of these folks right now have come through 18 months of living in a compression environment, and the realities that have come from that have forced a lot of folks to realize we need to step up our ability to sell again, and we need to grow our production. We're not going to cut our way out of this. We're not going to be able to get to a place where the system works without increasing our level of either market share or profitability within the market share we have. So we recognize that's where they wanted to go. So we shifted with them this year and told them that up front. If you're going to be in the program, come knowing that we're going to be working hard to find new and creative ways to grow your production. And that may mean in some cases getting back to some fundamentals that people had maybe atrophied a bit on over the last decade.
Sure. You know, it's funny how you just said that some of the fundamentals, because you get atrophy from those fundamentals, because I think Ryan has too. Sometimes when you go back and you revisit those basics, because you've stepped away from them or you've grown away from them, you remember how powerful they are, right?
Well, I think on the last 4 podcasts, possibly, we've talked about just what's it take to be successful, and usually it's just going back to the basics every single time. There's not a secret. It's just hard work and going back to the basics.
No, it's so true. And it's not sexy, right? People hear it and they think, oh yeah, I already know that. Knowing it and doing it. There's sometimes a huge gap between the two of those, and figuring out why we're not doing it. Some people just have some anxieties you have to deal with. Some people are simply out of shape. They just haven't been in that rhythm. Some folks are misguided. They perhaps think their value is still worth something that matched up with a value prop 3 years ago and is no longer bringing in the level of lead generation that it used to. Lots of different reasons, but the common denominator is getting back to some basics, getting back to some fundamentals. Todd Bookspan, do you know my friend Todd?
Yep.
Todd
Win
and I
by Noon.
That is true. The founder of Win by Noon, former Building Champions coach.
Future Hunt for Success podcast guest.
I will make sure that is a reality. Todd and I have been longtime friends, but we sat in a room with this Masters Coach group in Aspen last year. And as we went around the room, a producers roundtable that had 30, 40 folks around the table, all with hands in production. And I just leaned over to him at some point and said, it feels like Back to the Future. We are revisiting the things that we all learned 10 or 15 years ago that someone told. I mean, some of the technology and the platforms have evolved, but the fundamentals,
They don't go away.
no.
They don't go away.
No.
And even real quick, even in life, we were just talking about little boys, Little League Baseball
Yeah.
before we started this.
Yeah.
And me and one of the coaches had a quick conversation before the game. Hey, if the league doesn't have a most improved player award, we need to make it happen, because one of our players is a first-year player. His dad is a business guy and gets the hard work piece. And he went from basically not knowing anything about baseball to he's one of the better players on our team. And the only reason is because his dad says, hey, if you want to get better, you have to practice. But his dad's willing to put the work in with him. But we told him, his dad's like, what do I need to do at home? Do this, do that, do this. Just fundamentals. But he does it every single night. And man, he's come a long ways this year, and it's impressive to watch. It's really cool.
It's amazing how often luck and hard work match up.
Do the other
right?
kids on the team see that? Do you think they recognize that he's improved and why?
We do spotlight him, and I think so, because a lot of the kids, if they haven't been putting in the work, they're probably going to be in the outfield, so they're not and I don't even mean a liability like, oh, they can't they can't, field the ball. Like, they could get hurt if the ball's hit hard enough at them and they're afraid of the ball or they haven't been putting in the work. So we definitely spotlight it, and he's one of those players that has moved from the outfield to consistently in the infield now. He's a great player, so we do put him in the outfield because he can catch the ball as well. But it's been really fun to watch. Really, really cool.
I think that's kind of a good setup here. So at lunch today, you said, what's our one win we can get out of it? What's your definition of the win? I think is the way you put it for today's podcast. And one of the answers I gave was, I just want to have one person take something away from this podcast and have it affect them in a positive way. And I think with the philosophies you want to talk about in the email you sent me, and coming off your conference, I think it'll be really easy to do today. So what I would like to start off, and we talked about this a lot at lunch, was if you are an entrepreneur, small business owner in sales or whatever it is, how do you, and this is going to be a long-winded question, how do you
Should
win?
I take some notes here?
How and when do you know when you need coaching? Mm-hmm. If you've been in coaching or had a business coach and gotten away from it, when and how do you get back in? And for me, it was, I was going to sales mastery, and coaching was always there, it was always pitched to me. And then at an event, I just said, okay, after hearing top performers, and you have those thoughts of what's different about them than me? Nothing. Why can't I be up there? Why can't I be doing that type of production? Why can't I have that success? And so before I had a chance to talk myself out of it, they pitched their coaching, and I walked over to the booth, threw my credit card down. Didn't call my wife and ask if I could spend the money. Didn't go up and talk to Ryan afterwards and say, I'm thinking about coaching. You want to do it with me? I just said, I'm going to go do this right now before I talk myself out of it. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
So you teed up a couple of really great conversations, but I want to pick up where you left off, because it sounds like we have a parallel universe there. It wasn't that long ago that I sat in a sales mastery audience and I listened to the platform of, 10, 15 really great presenters. But when I say really great presenters, I want to be fair. A lot of them felt like presentations. And there was one guy I remember on that stage that when he was presenting, it didn't feel like a presentation. It felt like we were having an actual meaningful conversation. And I realized that's awkward, right? We're in a room of 1,500 people at that event. But I knew in my mind that what he was describing really touched on what mattered most to me in terms of my vision for my growth and the way I wanted to grow. So the numbers alone weren't motivating to me. It was the why behind them. And a guy named Daniel Harkavy was on that stage talking about things that resonated with me. And I don't want to discount any of the other folks I heard from, but like you, I literally at the break made a beeline to wherever that booth was and said, I'm in. How do we get this started? And so I do relate to that. And so my experience is perhaps coming from that side of recognizing clearly that I had a passion to be coached. And maybe that's where I'd go with your first question is I think someone has to know why they want to be coached rather than when is it appropriate to be coached.
So what would be some reasons why? The obvious one would be accountability, right? So
I hear that a lot.
Yeah. And one of the questions we ask on this podcast a lot, and I was surprised after maybe doing 20 of these, how many, when I said, do you require high level accountability, how many people are really successful said, I'm pretty self-accountable.
Yeah.
So what are some other reasons people would want a business coach?
So it's an appropriate question because accountability does come up a lot. I think the assumption around accountability is it's more of like a baseline expectation, not the highest level reason that I do this, but rather, hey, if there's not going to be accountability, all the other stuff is a little bit moot. So we want to establish that first. And for most folks, I don't know how you guys deal with accountability, but for me, I want to be accountable to commitments I've made. So if I'm not able to work with a coach, whether it's on the baseball field or whether it's in my mortgage branch, I want to be accountable to the commitments I make. Because if there aren't commitments made and there's not a consequence built into those commitments, then accountability can turn into this really wonky thing in a hurry. And it can be weird for people because some people don't know how hard should I press, or other people might feel like he's not pressing hard enough. And you get into this weird nebulous space, and I find most of the time accountability misses because we just didn't have a really clear set of commitments. and a really clear set of consequences.
So do you think that starts in the very first get to know you
I don't know any other way.
session?
I don't know any other way. I ask people up front, scale of 1 to 10. 1 being, don't ever bring up the word accountability again. 10 being, if you're not grabbing my face mask on each and every call to rattle it around to get my attention, we didn't have a coaching call. Where do you rank yourself and why?
So do you think as a coach you can be anywhere on that scale that they need you to be? Or is this where you start to say, I'm the perfect coach for you, or I might not be the perfect coach for you?
If it's possible to answer that, yes. I think the answer is, I think it's possible, number one, for me to recognize where you're on the scale, but it's also possible for me to recognize I'm not the right match for you, because coaching isn't about me. I think that's a big misnomer that we have to deal with in our industry is a lot of folks get to a place where they're coaching because they've had some level of success and they have some level of audience of people who've said, hey, teach me, or, how did you do it? Help me out. And if you've got that desire, that becomes a natural progression. But the mistake would be to think that somehow I'm better than you or you simply because I have some title called coach. In fact, I don't know how you view it on the sports field, Ryan, but for me, a really great coach understands his job is to get the most out of that individual player, not to make himself the center or the focal point of that team. That's why I'm inspired by coaches like John Wooden. Sorry, I'll give some old references. Guys that have maybe not been hot on the circuit. Jim Valvano, other coaches who inspired the heck out of me because they made it about the players, not about themselves. And so I'm meandering around your question, but I really do think, is coaching for everyone? No, because not everyone has a stated desire to be better. Not everyone wants that fundamental accountability. And then back to the other question, what does it really take? Or what do I see? It's people that have a vision that is so big and they're so passionate about finding out how to get to that place, but they feel like the risk of getting there is huge. That's usually when I find out they want to learn more about coaching.
Okay, so let's role play. Let's say I think I'm self-accountable. I think I'm motivated. I don't need help in those areas. But what I need is somebody to help me business plan, somebody to help me identify when I need to hire and fire, somebody that needs to help me with production statistics and marketing analysis. Is there an area of coaching that could benefit somebody like that?
So since we're role playing, the first thing I would ask for in that scenario, right, if I've got this right, I don't need basic accountability. I need some help working through a plan, and I've got some very specific objectives I want to accomplish in that plan. The first thing I'd ask for is your business vision. Give me a sense of where this is going over a much larger narrative, a longer period of time. Where in the next 3, 5, 10 years are you defining some version of success so that I can understand before I dive into that plan with you what we're aiming for?
Okay, so this is what I love about Building Champions, because I first heard Building Champions at a sales rally in 2010, 11. And the first time I saw like a life plan, an actual format for a life plan was through Building Champions. So maybe talk about the person that's what they need. How do they start developing their own business plan or a plan within their business? Because it's not like you just, there's a format you can use, right?
Yes and no.
Okay, talk about that.
True, there are some formats, although I don't like to think that tools dictate the outcome. If they're helpful, we use them. If they're not, kick them to the curb. So the answer to your question, because you brought in a different example of a tool being a life plan, where a business vision and a life plan to me have different outcomes. But if I were to look at them in the larger narrative, a life plan tells me where my life is orienting toward. And my business vision tells me where this really critical piece of my life, where I earn my income, how I contribute to the world, where that's oriented towards. So think of those like a GPS. If I've got a good, clear sense of where my life, a better version of my life is heading and a better version of my business is heading, I've got an axis radius. I know where points on that compass aim toward. I know where that GPS map can lay a coordinate. Once I have that, it's a lot clearer for me to help that person with the plan, because we can eliminate a lot of the unnecessary side roads of life that aren't even aiming in that direction.
Yeah, they have to be in conjunction.
It helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Imagine this, the analogy will break down, because all analogies break down. But, if you and I headed back over across the river to PDX, and I said, come on, Cody, we're jumping on a plane. We're going to go take a flight. Here's the plan, right? We're going to drive over. We're going to get on the plane. We're going to, the first thing you'd want to start asking,
Where are we going?
where are we going? How long are we going to be gone? What do I need to bring? What are we going to do while we get there?
Is this a one-way ticket?
You're going to be asking questions that look more like vision. Then plan is the agenda for each day. Plan is how we're going to get those things done. So I have to help that person that wants to dive right into the plan understand that if a vision without a plan is a dream, a plan without a vision is probably more like a nightmare.
So how do you help somebody that thinks they have a vision but maybe hasn't put a lot of thought into it and doesn't have a lot of clarity there? How do you help somebody, no matter what stage they're in? Maybe they're a newer entrepreneur and they have a vision of I want to grow this business, but how do you help them figure out the definition of their vision?
So you touched on this earlier, and we do have a process we take folks through to do that. I don't want to overly highlight the process because it boils down to, I think, a good litmus test of these 5 things. A good vision tells me on a very direct level who you are as a professional, what you really want, why you really want it, where you're going to focus your unique abilities, and when you're going to take action. If your vision accomplishes that, and I can work with you to get those questions answered, the complexity of how we create that from there, eloquent statements, long examples, lots of behavioral examples of what that would look like if it played out, goals. I mean, there's all kinds of things we can do to unpack from that. But I always start with, if your vision doesn't tell me those 5 things, before we even get into the time horizon or all of the details of it, I'm concerned that what we have is still foggy. So I try to keep it simple.
Is that a pretty common, not a problem, is that a pretty common place for people, especially entrepreneurs, to kind of be when they start looking at coaching? Is, because I kind of have an idea of where I want to go, but I haven't thought about the who, what, when, where, and why.
It's amazing. I guess the answer is they maybe haven't, but it's amazing when you actually invest a little bit of time to help them work through that. And you give them an opportunity to tell you, okay, well, this is who I am. And I mean that on a really deep level. Like, what are those convictions? We all know things in life that we're convicted by, those things that we would say, yeah, that's a hill I'm willing to die on. Like, I don't go there, or I won't ever let go of that. Those are you hear the word values a lot, like corporate mission statements will often have their values listed. To me, values are a really important concept, but the deeper root of them is that individual leader's conviction. Because if we don't have a sense of where I'm willing to say yes or no because of something I believe in deeply, values can become a bit diluted. Like, I can tell you how much I value healthy food, but you'll say, but Michael, you really crushed a good cheeseburger today.
I had donuts.
I'm not judging. You didn't have to out yourself.
All right, so I'm going to take us all over the map.
Okay.
So I apologize to listeners that are frustrated. This conversation's going a million different directions, but to what you just said,
You wanted to coach you through it?
I'm going to lose my thought. Okay, so a good theme that one of my mentors told me this week, and we talked about this at lunch, was never apologize for something you're passionate about. Okay. That really resonated with me in the one specific thing we were talking about, but then in a lot of other aspects of my week. So with that said, those people you were just referencing to, when they start hitting a topic that they're extremely passionate about, how do you keep them grounded and direct their passion the right way? Because, and let me ask you this, can passion take you down a path that wasn't the right decision?
Yes. But you used a word there that maybe it's semantics. I don't know if I want to ground someone on the topic of passion, right? Because to me, exploring someone's passion, I want to give them the freedom to tell me things that are borderline a little bit unbelievable. If we don't really get to a place where we're stretching to that level of where your vision captures things that would make somebody say, really? You're going to do. I mean, if someone had told Richard Branson to kind of ground his vision, he'd probably have grounded his planes long before he was grounding rockets. If someone had told Steve Jobs to ground his little idea of handheld computers to a laptop, we probably wouldn't be holding powerful computers in our hands. So I don't know if I'd use the word grounded. But it's not because I'm playing semantics. It's because in a time where we're talking about vision, this is where I want to explore everything, right up to the ridiculous. Because in the ridiculous, sometimes we find the root of the passion because we keep asking the question, why? It's okay to have all kinds of big goals, big dreams. So let's get them all out there. But let's get to the why behind them, because often the why behind them is where that passion is going to come out. And it's why they're going to fight tooth and nail no matter what it takes to get where they want to go. And so I don't want to do anything to hem that in. I don't want to do anything to tether that. When we're working with a leader, tell me everything, even the stuff that somebody else might say, that's loony. I want to hear it all, because then I can help them formulate it, put it into some sort of organizational process where we can do something with it. But it starts with, let's get who I am, what I really want, and why I really want it out there. And for some folks, those are a few sentences. Other folks, man, it's pages of information.
And that's kind of where I'm at with my coaching. Is I love that passion, the vision piece of it, but I love how we started this with your conference, where if you get going in that direction, it's great to have a coach to say, I support you, let's explore, let's do this, but can't forget the basics. Because sometimes those passions can take you away from the basic, boring, unfun, unexciting things that are really necessary to create a foundation. Am I correct?
Totally agreed. Yeah, they're not either or statements. They're and. Yeah, if you're going to give yourself potential. I mean, let's talk baseball, right? I mean, if Ozzie Smith, when I grew up, was the greatest shortstop of the 80s.
The Wizard.
He was the Wizard of Oz. What I love about the Wizard was his story of growing up was when he couldn't afford a glove, but he could afford like a rubber ball. I'm picturing like maybe a racquetball that he found on the street. He would throw that thing at a brick wall and then a set of stairs for hours a day to just work on his ability to react with his bare hands. Those fundamentals became critical to his vision to become an all-star shortstop on a world championship 1982 St. Louis Cardinals team, I might add. That possibility, he didn't at any point in time get to separate himself from those fundamentals, because that's what gave him the ability to grow and become one of the greatest shortstops of the modern era. Fundamentals were critical. And we can think of all kinds of examples. I mean, I love the Michael Jordan examples. The guy who stays in the gym long after practice is over to grind out how many ever free throws, how many ever three-point shots. That fundamental grind is critical to anyone who wants to achieve high. So, yeah, it's definitely an and statement, not an or.
Well, and we talked at lunch about the ability to manipulate your coach, right? And I've been saying that a lot lately because I've had coaches.
Are you going to manipulate me?
No, but I think that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? Is that I get so passionate about a project or a new idea or something that takes me away from that, and I get my coach excited about it.
You have shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, and now we're all going after this big thing while at the same time I'm unaware that we're leaving the true foundation of what we talked about in our first one-on-one. And so that's what I meant by manipulating, right? It's not like I'm trying to cheat, but that's what I was talking about.
So let's use, since you said earlier, let's role play it. Let's play that out. So let's say you bring to me this new, you come back from a conference and you heard all about HomeBot, right? Mm-hmm. I don't sell it, but it's a tool I think right now is
it's really popular,
totally worth talking about. But let's say you come back and like that's going to be the new thing. We got to. The first question I'm going to ask you. If we've agreed on here's where you're headed and here's the plan, I'm going to look at your plan and the first thing I'm going to ask you is, where is the new energy you're going to put into that going to remove something from your current plan? Where did you just upgrade the plan? Because if you're just stacking on, your overall performance level just went down. Mm-hmm. Your likelihood of hitting everything that you said were in your outcomes or the commitment to the disciplines you made just significantly went down because you added. So if you're going to tell me where we just upgraded, let's talk it through, because I want to understand the why behind why this is such a great opportunity, why we're going to pour hours of time into uploading our database into this great new tool, why we're going to explain to all of our customers how it's going to provide incredible value to keep them in our ecosystem. I'm not pitching the product. I'm just saying if we get to that place, great. I want to hear it. I'm always interested in ideas, but not every great idea is urgent. Maybe the real answer is that is an awesome idea. Let's put it in the corner of the whiteboard. Let's come back to it in the next quarter and make that an improvement project in your next set of commitments. Let's nail these first. We have to figure that out.
And from a coach, that sounds like it would be difficult to do, because it would be easy to step away from that because you have someone excited. Let's just add to that excitement and the call positive, right? And it makes your job a little bit easier, kind of as a coach. It almost seems.
Yeah, if I don't want to coach, it makes it easier. Yeah. But I mean, I think if I'm really passionate about keeping them focused on what we agreed to up front, Cody, you had goals for the year. They were based on your 5-year vision. You had commitments this quarter to things you were going to do, calls you were going to make, appointments you were going to set, all the lead actions. Don't impress me with your lag measures unless I know your lead measures. Once I'm
say that again.
Don't impress me with your lag measures. How many apps you took, how many clients you closed, how much volume you closed. Those are lag measures. I never want to hear those first. Those are a byproduct of previous lead measure work you did. So let's stay focused on lead measures, and lag measures will always follow.
I like that.
You're going to be a top scorer on the court when you tell me how many shots you took in practice. When you're going to tell me how hard you worked to create those shots versus celebrating because maybe your defender just didn't play well that night. I don't want to be impressed by that just because you put up some numbers on the scoreboard. Numbers will come when disciplines are committed to lead activities, not lag measures. Don't anybody hear that I think lag measures don't matter, but too often we start with the lag measures. Hey, what volume did you close last month? Hey, how many units was that? Dude, how much money did you make? That's rearview mirror stuff.
Is that what kind of causes that roller coaster in production?
Yeah, you're dead on. Think about that. If all I focus on are lag measures, I'm sort of I call it EKG production. I'm guilty of it. If I allow lag measures to drive what I think is the results of my performance. Yes, it's the ultimate measure. Of course, our business is based on putting up those numbers. But if I can keep you focused on those lead measures, the commitments you made to do the certain things that we know drive those, and we stay focused there, and we're really clear on the pull-through ratio of when I do these things, those lag measures show up. Law of averages, that's where they are. Then I'm going to stay focused here. You just keep shooting free throws. You just keep shooting jump shots.
And isn't that kind of what coaching is in a nutshell? Is you're shelling out X amount of dollars for future results. Right?
It's an interesting way to phrase it. So how about I say I can follow that? I tell people all the time, my highest and best value is not my ability to, get you fired up. It's my ability to break down the game film. If I can help you break down the game, which means we've got to be really clearly committed to that plan and to what we track. And that's why when you bring in that new bright, shiny object idea, I'm going to say, the answer isn't no, it's let's vet it quickly. Go ahead.
So I like what you did there in both of those topics. And it just reminds me the importance of having a solid coach that actually knows what they're doing and is disciplined themselves not to get sidetracked and to go, whoop, time out. Let's sideline that till next quarter. We got the basics to work on. And I think a lot of coaches would be really guilty of getting really excited about your passion and just saying, yeah, man, let's run with this. And you're saying you can't stack that.
I'm never, the fine balance, you're dead on. The fine balance is I don't want to pour cold water on your passion. I just want to contextualize it. Because if it suddenly became more important than what you've already committed to, look, this is your life. Let's recommit. Let's recommit to that. We've just agreed. It's like an NCAA tournament bracket. We've got the number 1 seeds. If you're going to bring in a number 12 seed for an upset, let's be really clear that we're now taking that team to the Sweet 16.
So we at lunch we talked about my old coach Brian Frazier, and he was so good at that, and because he was so intimate with my business, where he knew everyone. He knew all of our staff's names. He knew what my business plan was, what my 1-year goal, what my 90-day goal, what my 5-year goal was, and he was very intimate with everything. And it gave me the freedom to go out and explore passions and bring explore ideas and bring them in and have them vetted and strategically put in my business plan. And it kind of freed me up a little bit from worrying about those things because I knew he had my back there, and I could go to a conference and get excited and come back with 20 things to put on my whiteboard, and he would help me identify which ones, right? So I think that's a huge value that I didn't recognize at the time, but I recognize it now about having a coach. Back to passion really quick. Passion's one of those words kind of like love. Like in Italian, there's like 6 different words for love, and in English we have one, love, right? I would say it's the same with passion. And we've been talking about passion as like kind of a vision. Like I'm really passionate about what I want to do and how I want to get there. But there's also small areas or more well-defined areas of passion that I think can be a pitfall for people too. It's one thing I've had pointed out with me in my coaching is like you can be really passionate about caring for your employees, right? To the point where it can be a fault. You might be able to keep somebody on too long because you're so passionate about making sure they're taken care of, and you don't have that. It goes against your nature to have to terminate someone's employment, right? So that was one area where coaching really helped me. It was saying, okay, I know you're so passionate, you don't want to lose people, but here's from a business coach, here's what you need to do and why. So do you kind of feel, you understand what I'm saying?
I do, and so I created a scenario in my head of let's imagine that we're working through that vision exercise, and you've told me that one of your convictions is I want to be passionate about what we do, or I don't want to do it. Like let's be all in. Great. I want to know what that means to you. I want to know examples of that. Like play that out for me in real life. Like what would that look like? Because more important to me than defining it or picking one of those, Latin root words is where does it hit you in the heart? Where does it hit you in the gut? Where are you going to grab that word and say, this is what it means to me? Okay, great. We got that. Then maybe you say, well, another one of our convictions is profitability. Like everything we do, like we don't do things that aren't profitable. So then we're going to ask a question when I get all of those things clear. So what happens when your passion isn't profitable?
Yeah.
We're going to play that out. It's like practice. We're going to play that out on the practice court before we go out into that office, which is, the arena where the real game gets played. Because if we don't work that out in practice, the risk for you is exactly what you said. Well, now, I've got these 2 things that are kind of in conflict with each other. And I don't really know what to, and now I'm kind of missing them both. There's an old Russian proverb that says a man goes out to chase 2 rabbits and he catches neither. That's what I'm trying to keep in this scenario, a leader from recognizing after it's too late and both are gone. They're not profitable and their people have lost their passion because we got a lesser version of both.
It's kind of like strength finders, Ryan, where have you done the strength finder where you can over operate in your strength? It's kind of like that. You can over operate in your passion sometimes to a fault.
And if we're being honest, so let me make sure I don't sit on the high horse. Aren't we all? I mean, we all have that ability to do that. I mean, I got so passionate today that I put on a Zeppelin shirt. You put on a Sabbath shirt. We all can go a little over the line. It happens. And that's, all joking aside, of course. Yeah, I think we have to.
And you shouldn't have to apologize for it, to Patrick's point.
I didn't.
No, but what I'm saying is people shouldn't, it's okay to be over passionate. You shouldn't have to apologize. But having that coach there, right?
Absolutely. And I think that you just nailed what I would tell you about me. I need someone in my life to do that too. I can't coach you with excellence if someone else isn't flying in my blind spot and saying, Regan, this is what you said. This is what you committed to. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. And if you're not doing it, there's consequences because we agreed on that up front. I mean, I've had some clients. I mean, I don't know if people want an example of this, but I've got some clients where we're real clear. If the issue over those fundamentals involved tracking their activities for the week, those outbound leading indicators that are going to tell me if those lag measures are going to show up, and I'm going to get that tracker. We agreed to it every Friday by 4:00. Don't go home without uploading it. I've got some clients where our agreement, the accountability is don't bother calling next week. Because if you didn't complete your tracker on time and there wasn't some legitimate reason why that didn't happen, you probably should be spending your time on our coaching call making calls, not calling me to tell me why you didn't get your calls in.
Absolutely.
Embarrassment. That's the.
And I've got, right now, there's probably going to be a client who'll listen to this and say, that's exactly right. And that's what I need. And those calls are expensive when they miss them. And they totally appreciate the value of it. And that doesn't tend to happen again.
Yeah. Can you toss me my phone, Ryan?
Yeah.
We can continue talking about coaching, but
You're gonna give one of my clients a call to see how this goes?
no. You just your assistant sent me a text with a list of topics, and I thought there was some really good fundamentals in there, and I wanted to remind myself of what they were. That's so funny. You wore a Led Zeppelin shirt. All right. Let's see.
You do realize
Pruning. Go ahead.
Well, okay. Well, let's don't distract. Pruning.
Well, what were you going to say? Go ahead.
I'll say it is pretty important to note that depending upon your perspective, these two bands in 1970 established that fork in the road that became heavy metal. These are the bands that established. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, we could have worn a lot of shirts today.
Yeah, I went through
we're at the root of the tree.
We are, and there's some other bands we can add in there.
So now that I brought up a tree, let's talk pruning.
Well, okay.
There we go.
We'll save because I can go. This could be a 3-hour podcast. We
call
start
that
talking about metal.
It's a long way to the
Call
top
that
if you want to rock and roll.
a segue or a pivot.
Yeah.
Let's hit it.
No, I want to come back. I want to come back to music when we're done because there's some good analogies we can make that aren't baseball.
As long as you guys don't take me down the hunting road, I'll be fine.
All right. So yeah, pruning. Let's talk pruning.
Yeah. Well, give me a scenario, because pruning for me is a good illustration that I can bring from a book called Necessary Endings. You ever read Henry Cloud? Henry Cloud's an author. He's written several great books. I think my favorite book by him is Boundaries for Leaders. We'll talk, book reviews offline, but Necessary Endings was a book that I think has been out maybe 10 years now, and don't quote me, but I think somewhere in the second chapter, he introduces the idea of pruning. First time I had read it in this context, he says, imagine a master gardener. And I think the garden has a rose bush in it. And so his analogy works like this. Our ability when all of these great ideas come along. So you've come back from the conference, you want to try this new thing. And I said to you, well, let's look at how that matches up against what you've already committed to. Pruning works like this. You identify 4 areas on a plant in which you would prune. This is his analogy. First, you identify the dead branches, the ones that clearly are dead and not producing life, fruit, flowers, whatever they're doing. Easy to prune. Then you identify the dying branches. Where in your business is something clearly not going to make it, but we're holding on to it for whatever reason. We used to love her. We used to like doing that. It was a group I used to get a lot out of. Whatever it is, the dying branches. The third one is the one that most people struggle with. It's that branch that's alive, but in order to stay alive, it's coiling its way around the plant and taking a disproportionate amount of energy away from the plant itself in order to stay alive. It's essentially choking other branches so that it can live. And if you've ever looked closely at a plant, we've seen these before. Pruning those, the fourth being the living branch, the one that has the ability to multiply tenfold. So the art of this in our business planning process, when we've identified those commitments and those disciplines that you're going to execute on toward those outcomes that you're going to measure, is figuring out then how are we going to identify the dead, the dying, and the disproportionate energy suckers that are keeping you from the real things that are going to drive the results. So when I say breaking down the game film, pruning is a process in which I tell my clients we can never get tired of, because just like in the garden, it's a regular habit. So about every quarter, I have them review their business plan. We do a QBR, quarterly business review. And the idea behind this session is to find where those 3 branches exist. Nobody fights me on cutting the dead branches. They don't.
It's easy.
They already know it. It's like, oh, good. I can let go of that? Great, because that sucked. Okay, that was easy. How about the dying ones? This is tough because I'll take clients through. I use a navigator tool, which is one of our tools, but tools are generic, right? There's other versions of this where we're looking at referral sources. Where do leads come from? So let's just say the scenario is I'm working with a producer. It could be with someone who's recruiting, and we're looking at those as well. But in this case, we'll use a producer. We've got referral sources that consistently are not delivering great results. So the first question I ask is, I want to dig into where are we investing into these folks? Because maybe in that people and process, maybe the problem is we're not investing enough in the people. We're counting on them to give, and we're not really contributing to them in a meaningful way. So we look at that. We try to identify where we're missing. But maybe the reality is something's changed. Something's changed, and we have no control over it. It's a dying branch. Just because you love them doesn't mean you can count on them for results. So we have to shift resources away from them. Finding out that third level is always where we have the most difficulty, because they're going to show me, but that, real estate office sends me all kinds of business. But when we look closely, what they send are all kinds of leads, and very few of those leads are qualified. And the ones that are qualified, very few get locked and closed. And so we have to look closely at how much time and energy, how much staffing I have to provide, how much resource I have to put behind just this one relationship, that when I really look at the actual numbers, I realize, wow, for those 20 calls you get a month, you're getting 5 leads, you're getting 2 applications, you're getting 1 closing, and yet this other referral source you have over here gives you 5 leads a month, and 4 of them apply, and 3 of them bring back contracts. I mean, we run the math, and we prune. We figure out where to prune. And don't mistake pruning, because the analogy breaks down. Not everybody gets taken out back and killed. Pruning can mean, okay, I have to adjust my focus away from the time and energy I'm putting into that relationship, and find new and creative ways to invest that time in other relationships. Pruning is people, process, sometimes products that I just have to move away from in order to stay optimized. And if I can help someone figure out how to prune, often that's where we create the space for them to either get better with the things they're already doing, or add that new idea that we now bring off of the whiteboard and say, hey, now there's some space. We can actually do this now effectively, because you've let go of this thing that was really sucking your time. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. 100%. Especially that last part. All of us coming back from a conference. Because I put 20 plus things on my whiteboard. And if I'm being honest, I got 5 done this week, maybe 6. And then as I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, how much energy did I give into this one thing that probably, if I'm honest, probably doesn't have a huge impact?
The hardest thing, and I'll say it of myself, the hardest thing I have to do when I have that list of great ideas is separate what is important from what is urgent. Because I assume if I put it on the list, it was already important at some level. And I can rank them, I can figure out a way to determine how important. But at some point, urgency is my ability to prioritize that thing. Here's an interesting, something interesting I learned that perhaps in our generation, we just grew up with thinking was normal. Do you know that prior to my generation, the word priority was never used in a plural context? By definition, it meant the one thing.
It is a priority.
It is a priority.
Yeah.
Like the concept of what are your priorities? If we'd have, found somebody in the 1940s or 1950s, they would have looked at you like, what does that mean? And I think some of that reality that's shifted in our lifetime has come from a misunderstanding of this concept of multitasking. You guys know the term. A lot of us think that that's like a real attribute, my ability to multitask. You know where the term comes from?
It just takes longer,
No.
man.
So somewhere in the 60s, smart guys at companies like Intel were developing the computers that used to fill rooms like this, mainframes, right? Big boss computers. And they had all kinds of, technology that was amazing in the 60s, but today we would laugh at. The ability for them to design a processor in that era that could do 2 things at one time or 3 things at one time became known as multitasking. It was designed, the word was created to describe a process that existed in computing, and it was meant specifically to describe a process that existed in computing. Somewhere in the 70s, really smart folks, maybe at Madison Avenue, decided that in marketing, that this newly liberated mom, the working mom, looked a lot like this description of a multitasker. And they had ads like, she can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan. And she was celebrated for her ability to, have her phone here, baby here, and get the deal done. Like, she was a multitasker. So Madison Avenue sort of celebrated this idea that multitasking was an attribute, a human attribute, when in fact it never existed for that purpose. Well, 30, 40 years later, brain science has caught up with this, fork in the road and has said, wait a minute. You do realize the brain does not actually do that. Your brain doesn't actually do two things at once. Your brain can move back and forth out of things at microseconds, but it's not really doing two things at once. And so when I think about multitasking, I'm often quoted, my good friend Bill Hart loves this quote, it's your ability, multitasking is your ability to do twice as much as you should, about half as well as you could. And that, I think, bringing this all the way back around to pruning is I've got to find ways to help clients see where they've bought into the lie that they can have multiple priorities going at the same time. What we have to do is organize multiple priorities that they have or that they've been given and figure out how to really focus on them with excellence and move quickly to the next one so they can execute with excellence and have a high degree of repeatability, a high degree of result. It's a hard thing to do, but when people can stay focused and not be distracted, their results go up. Always. They always do.
I wonder how much I wonder how much energy it takes when you're forcing your brain to multitask, where it's switching gears hundreds of times a minute. Because there's days where if I show up and I have my agenda for the day and I'm time blocked out and I shut off my email and I focus on my calls and then I focus on my follow-up and then I focus on my lunch, being really present with that person, then come back and focus on 2 more follow-ups. I go home, I feel great. Lots of energy. Lately, it's like I'm falling into that multitasking where I have my email up, a podcast going, 2 drafted emails, a website, an estimate going out. I have all these things and I'm doing them all at once and I know I'm being completely inefficient. I get home and I'm like, how could I be so tired when I sat in front of in a desk all day long? How could I be so mentally exhausted? And I wonder if there's been a study done of how much energy it takes out of you to over-operate your brain. It's like it's overheating.
So the short answer is lots of studies done, and a lot of them get equated to what it's like when your brain is on drugs. And the studies that show this will tell us that often multitasking has a higher rate of dysfunction than actually taking drugs. I'll share some of it with you offline because I don't have the data handy.
Sure.
We can pull it up. My good friend Todd Mosetter will be glad to share that data. But let's go back to your example, because why make it complicated when you just gave a really beautiful, simple example? So if you were walking into your office every day with a dedicated plan to make calls for 45 minutes, and you already knew who you were going to call, and you could walk in without a computer distracting you or a mobile phone distracting you, and you could just pick up this good old-fashioned desk phone and make those calls for 45 minutes, how much more consistently would you get results doing that than if you had 3 monitors open, an iPhone here? Like, you tell me, what would your experience be like? Which one would give you better results by the end of the week?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I have a little chair in my office. It's away from my desk. And I've been feeling lazy whenever I go sit in it. But lately I've been making my calls from there because it's away from my desk. And we have big windows and I know everyone's looking at me going, he's just sitting there. I got my AirPods and I'm talking my AirPods. But you're absolutely right. Those calls always go better. And then I find myself getting energy and during the call, subconsciously standing up and walking in circles in my office while I'm having a great conversation and crushing it.
And it probably changes the tenor of your voice. It probably changes the energy level you're giving to that person. I mean, we're back to the beginning of the call, or back to the beginning of the podcast. It's a fundamental. We've forgotten the art of keeping prospecting simple. And I'm not going to glorify calls as the only source. There's lots of things we could be doing, right? We could be making phone calls. We could be writing handwritten notes. We could be sending items of value. We could be sending a text. We could be attaching a video to an email. There's all kinds of things we could do. So I don't want to make it all calls, but I would argue the phone is still a pretty stinking cost-effective and efficient tool. Start there. Before you spend a lot of time on Facebook, make sure you've made your calls.
So we may have hit this, but I've got 5 bullet points that you sent me. One of them is priority
maybe
management.
We'll hit 2 of them.
Yeah. One of them is priority management, creating a plan to balance your priorities toward desired results. So, I mean, the easy answer is get a coach, but
but I'm not here to pitch anything.
But I mean, some days I'll come in with a plan and I'll do it the night before. I'll review it in the morning. But how come it's so easy to fall off that wagon? How come it's so easy to just walk into the line of fire and start?
So I just sat in that room with some of perhaps our country's top producers. I mean, the folks that are in that room represent a good cross section of some of those folks that are doing amazing work. And when I say amazing work, again, I'll say making those lead and lag measures, not one over the other. They're driving the lead measures and they're getting the lag measure results. They'll say the same thing, that this is, no one's immune from this. In fact, as you move up, you tend to find that you have more and more things that can intersect. Because what do we do with top producers? We elevate them to roles like sales manager or branch manager. We add distractions to that highly productive person. And what do? We give them more resources, more platforms to manage, more technologies, more.
We're back. Technical difficulties. Apparently, that computer can't prioritize and multitask as well as we did, as we thought.
Do we need to do some pruning?
Yeah. We need to do some pruning. I did some pruning. All right, so we're back. We were talking about prioritizing in fundamentals. But yeah, I mean, what are your tips? You talked about coming back from a conference, lots of ideas on a board.
So generally speaking, I think what we've talked about is I want to start off with, let's get them all down on paper. Like, let's get everything down. Let's create, the brain dump, if you're familiar with the term. David Allen, getting things done, that concept of, let's start off with just a good old fashioned brain dump. So you've come back from Sales Mastery, you've got, a binder or a booklet full of notes. The first thing I want to do is let's get all of those, highlight all those things that were important enough to you to say, I want to spend some time on that. I want to look into that. Let's get that list first. And then let's break that list down and let's look at that through the lens of, which of these things fall into the category of important versus urgent. And then from that, let's take those and break them down. Which ones require us to work on now because they are going to best accomplish what you've already said you're going to accomplish in an outcome. And which of these would be a new idea that perhaps deserves some attention, but it doesn't deserve it now. And so we'll put these out into the annual plan process. I mean, an annual plan isn't just something we log every January. I mean, you're sitting here today in, mid-May? You're annually planning until next May because there's new things coming along all the time. Covey's Big Rocks would be the best way that I can think of to illustrate this is, if we've got those things in our annual calendar that look like the big rocks, the things that we say are most important out of that life plan and that business vision that deserve to be in that annual calendar, well, then we're going to look at it and say, okay, well, where are those small rocks that need to fit? Where do we get to a place where now we have a good long run? And annual planning is a difficult thing for people to do, but when we help them do annual planning, breaking it down on a quarterly basis becomes more manageable. So all those fresh ideas have a place to fit in that annual plan.
I'm going to totally go a different direction here, if that's okay with you, because I don't want to overlook what just happened. I was watching Chernobyl. We talked a little bit about lunch. It's a new miniseries on HBO. The first episode was on. We watched it last night. And in the nuclear power plant, there was an explosion. They're scared of meltdown. And you have the head guy in charge in the control room. And everyone's starting to panic. People are starting to show signs of radiation on their face. And he remains so calm. And he's like, don't panic. Go to your emergency protocols. Do this, this, and this. And he never loses that. We just lost our laptop. during this podcast, and I felt myself getting mad. You know, God damn it. You know, I said, okay, there's a business coach in the room. Keep your shit together. It's just a small problem. But that happens every day in our business, right? Where one thing doesn't go right and it throws us off and we lose our prioritizing, we lose our to-do list, and all of a sudden all that's not important anymore because this disaster happened.
It's just that statement, did you have a bad day or did you have a bad 5 minutes that you let stew for your whole day?
Yeah. And I caught myself, I pulled myself out of it, but it would have been really easy to let that disaster ruin what we're doing today. Do you find your clients going through that? Do you see them going through that?
So this falls under a topic that most people call mindset, right? And we find, you know, science tells us that most of us process in either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset looks simply like this. Things are good or they're bad. We win or we lose. It's either right or it's wrong. Very black and white thinking. That's fixed mindset. Growth mindset says, okay, what just happened? What could we do? What could we learn? What's possible now? It explores possibilities as we go through very real events in life, where the other sees things as pass fail. So yes, I work with clients all the time whose natural reaction, and let me be maybe clear on this, all of us, not just clients, all of us, it's a human nature reaction, a self-preservation, you know, the old fight, flight, or freeze. To go into a fixed mindset is a very natural thing to do when bad things happen. It's a protection mechanism. So fixed mindset isn't in and of itself a terrible thing. It's getting stuck in it that we have to be careful of. And so we have to have a pathway to get out. Otherwise it becomes a bit of a cul-de-sac. And you've probably been around people who just can't get off that bad thing that happened to them. And it's not yesterday or last week. It's like it happened in high school and they're still carrying it around. That's something we definitely have to work on, because you're exactly right. I mean, this industry maybe it's hard to compare industries when you don't live in other industries, but my gosh, is there an industry that has as many potential pitfalls just baked into the process as we see in real estate and mortgage lending? It's a constant game of cobbling. We're trying to keep this thing together. So a lot of fixed mindset. And I've got to work on that with everybody, is where do we find the growth opportunity in what just happened?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, you see people and your friends and your family and your coworkers going through that. What tips do you have to help people through that? Because sometimes talking to them about it only makes it worse, right?
Yeah, it's true. And so timing is everything. Like in the middle of the heat, right? So this wasn't where you were around, but let's pretend this freaked you out at that moment. Me walking you through, you know, like a parent, this is, you know, bad parenting, like, you know, well, why didn't you look at the computer ahead of time and see what was on, you know, we do this, right?
And I answered Ryan's "I told you so" because I knew he was thinking about it, because a couple episodes ago, he's like, man, we should clear out some of this stuff. And I'm a hoarder. I'm a computer hoarder, and I didn't want to lose like all of our stuff. Yeah. And so I said it for him, because I felt that I'm like... No,
I wasn't judging.
I'm like, we should have cleared this out. You were right. Right?
There's a little brotherhood, man. You guys just knew. So timing is everything. I think you have to know... you have to know when it's appropriate to deal with that.
Because if Ryan would have gave me "I told you so," not to cut you off, but if he would have said "I told you to do this," that would have made me mad, and then it just would have been this escalating thing.
Yeah, I hate to keep throwing out topics, but you guys are demonstrating what we call emotional intelligence. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, and that flashpoint that you just, you know, avoided suggests that, okay, we know each other well enough to know how to do that. And so back to the coaching context, all I would say is there would be a point in time in which it's appropriate to say, okay, in our process, what do we learn from this? What opportunity is there to make this better? Versus, why didn't you do it? You know, man, how many times did I have to tell you? It's all in how we approach it. So fixed mindset is not just in our reactive in that moment, but it's also in, like, if I have a fixed mindset around the way in which I address it as a coach, I can really demoralize someone to where they're like, why am I paying for you to be in my life? All you do is make things worse. My job is to figure out when it's appropriate, but not avoid it, or to not dismiss it like, hey man, that's no big deal. Things happen.
We just watched our midweek motivator on Wednesday, where who was our speaker? I'm drawing a blank. Oh, it makes me so mad.
caught you
But
blank.
long story short, he talked about helping people basically feel their emotions versus just saying it's okay and trying to make it better. You can't always make it better. Let them feel whatever they're feeling and let them work through it, and not just try to glaze it over. And like as parents to our kids, like sometimes just saying it's okay isn't what's needed. It's helping them figure out their emotions and deal with it.
And he didn't like the word meditation. He liked the word mindset in lieu of that. And so he would take a minimum of 8 minutes in the morning to prepare his mindset for the day. So, and I think that what you were trying to say, Ryan, is that helps you. If you have your mindset set, you can help influence the people around you.
So you just said something that I want to hit on, and I acknowledge I'm liberally robbing this from the book Radical Candor. But the concept is this. You just used a great phrase. If the way I would handle that situation is with a response that you would give to your dog, that's probably not good coaching. Hey, it's okay. Hey, attaboy, we do this, right? We avoid the confrontation of giving honest feedback, critical feedback. We avoid the crucial conversation because it's uncomfortable. There's lots of reasons that go into that, but it's hard. We talked a little bit about feedback, but I think it takes, again, a real radical candor to be able to understand the ability that we do have to talk about this, but how we say it and when we say it matters as much as what we say. You ever heard that somebody tell you that? Like, hey, it's not what you said, it's
How you say it.
those aren't just little trite sayings. We've got to let that like pour over our brain a little bit and realize we can be correct. We can be truthful and still miss the mark because we're not using good emotional intelligence to recognize, hey, at that moment, if he says that to you or you say that to him, flashpoint, and everything, goes to hell in a hurry. Well, it didn't need to. We're cool. We're back. And that's because you guys had a moment of clarity and I think looked at, in that mindset analogy, you looked more at okay, what can we do? What can we do to get this back on track? And in our business, the more often we have that mindset, the more successful we are at the end of the day, because bad things are going to happen. They do.
Well, and in our industry, our clients depend on us to be like that. To have a problem, a fire pop up, and to resolve that without adding emotion to an already emotional process for them.
Well, I don't even think they know it,
Yeah.
but it's there.
Yeah. For us to be calm on the phone, to walk them through it. And this isn't that big of a deal. Your appraisal came in $65,000 low. We're going to do X, Y, Z. And they don't need me to be freaking out with them.
Well, if you had a consultant that could come in and watch, that 30-day escrow process independently, we would be shocked at how little of the emotional process we're aware of back at the kitchen table of that homeowner. We don't even know about all of the emotional stuff they're dealing with, just like they don't know what it's like back in the processing bullpen. There's a lot of emotion on both sides that's factored into this relatively clear transactional process, except the steps in it have little flashpoints in them all along the way. And neither one of us really realize what triggers those until sometimes they've gone off.
Is that one of the reasons that Building Champions put such an emphasis on the life planning and the personal life aspect of coaching, do you think?
It's a good question. And I think the answer is it's probably a little more deeply rooted in the fact that, when Daniel started the company, what he was most significantly impacted by as a production leader at that time and what he wanted to bring back into our industry was a sense of orientation, something that allowed him to guide someone out of the drift, because the drift exists in all of our lives at different points and at different times, personally and professionally. And without some resource to help guide a really important person that he might be managing or leading or coaching, without a process to follow, a whole bunch of, let me just put my arm around you and tell you we're going to get through this, isn't always what, that's somebody might need more than that. They might need clarity. They might need conviction. They might need commitment. And so the tool provides the ability to do that. And I think it's baked into the foundation of who Daniel is, and therefore all of us who believe so much in it as a centerpiece tool. Without that, the drift happens and we have no orientation. And a lot of good people have bad days, and those bad days turn into bad seasons. And and I guess when I look at my clients in the eyes, I don't want to lose one of them to the drift, and the drift happens.
What a great quote. Can I have my phone back with the risk of repeating what just happened? Well, it's funny now that you say that. It's like, what a great thing that happened, because we just brought up a topic that I think a lot of people struggle with. I know I do, and I know Ryan does too, because his office is next to mine. All right. I want to hit some of these other ones. We talked about priority management, process flow. We can talk about that. What do you mean by, so all these are easy except with the pruning. I didn't quite understand it, but I got an idea of what you're going with that. But what about the uniquely you? Can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so let's put it into the lens that we've already talked about so it doesn't feel like a different, disconnected topic. I often find in the vision exercise, when I'm working with someone, this can be difficult for them. And I told you about you called them the 5 W's, right? The who, what, why, when, and where. When someone is trying their best to look at their current reality and imagine a better version of the future, to create the step toward this vision process, a lot of what can happen once they've done that is they at some point have to bring that back down into the execution mode. Like, okay, I've done whatever that is. I've got a sense of my convictions, my mission, my purpose, some really key areas that I want to improve upon, some big goals I want to accomplish. Now I got to boil that down and start executing. And so they go into execution mode. They draft a plan. They've maybe got their commitments and they're ready to go. And then they go out into the world and realize, how do I say this? Like, how do I communicate what it is about me? I mean, I know what I just wrote, but the world, they don't give a rip. I look like, and I guess our context today is going to be a lot of loan origination, but this would apply to any industry. But the world's going to look at me and say, you look like a loan officer. And that guy looks like a loan officer. And the guy online looks like a loan officer. The guy down at my bank looks like, what is it about you that's different than any of these people? And too often what I think we fall back on is we avoid what's unique about us, and we kind of defer to, well, this is what we can do. We can close in 10 days. Well, we can give you this cool app so you can track everything in real time. We deflect to, what our company does instead of being really committed to those original questions, who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And it's because I find some people don't know what is it that makes them uniquely them. They're maybe not comfortable enough in the idea that what makes them unique is even that unique or maybe valuable to somebody else. They wouldn't know how to put it into a unique value proposition. They don't know how to articulate that and promote that. And so uniquely you is really a topic in which I explore with clients, because I want to understand, Cody, when I meet you, what makes you uniquely you? What is it about you that when I meet 100 other people that do something similar to what you do, I know that there's something about you that's just a little bit different that helps me know why I might choose to connect with you versus all these other fine people who do something similar. Because at the end of the day, sales boils down to a lot of relationships, people we know, people we like, people we trust. In that exchange, I need to understand pretty quickly, what is it about you that's uniquely you, so that I can make a decision as to whether or not I resonate with that and can connect with that. And that's a hard topic for people. They don't always know how to explore what makes them unique.
One takeaway I had from a conference several years ago is the best part about you is you. And I try to tell my daughter that whenever I see a struggle. I try to make it daily, but I don't. But whenever I see her, the best part about you is you. And I like what you said, because it's much more than just your physical appearance or the way you sound or the way you talk, but it's about who you are on the inside. I'm going to make some analogies. I'll do a sports and a music that on the physical side, because especially with video being so popular right now, people are really reluctant to put themselves out there because they don't like the way they look or the way they sound or whatever. But
Am I just too stupid? Because I have a face made for radio. So,
well,
go ahead.
I have a success and a failure with that. We'll do the music one first.
Okay.
Would be Jewel. Super popular singer-songwriter in the 90s. Kind of known for a big gap between her two front teeth.
No. She has some snaggle teeth.
Snaggletooth.
I wasn't
Is it
going to correct you,
snaggletooth?
but he's
Yeah.
dead on. It was
Yeah.
It's Snaggletooth. It's Michael Shahan that has the gap in his teeth.
Yeah, correct.
might be Strahan.
There was the sports
But I
analogy.
No, I got another one. That wasn't mine, but she got her teeth fixed, and everyone kind of lost their identity with Jewel. It was like the most disappointing. Like, why did you fix that? That was Jewel. The best part about you was you. I mean, your music was great, but your teeth, like that's what. And then the other one is you're gonna have to help me with the name. The basketball player that had the unibrow that came on the Pelicans. Now he's a superstar. A couple years ago, unibrow.
I got nothing, bro.
Who's the big guy in the Pelicans?
What's the moral of the story?
Same thing. Everyone would start criticizing him and
Got a
saying,
little waxing
"Why don't
and-
you shave your unibrow?" And he's like, "No, that's what people know me for." Right. So those are my two now. I can't remember the guy's name. Those are my two now.
So it's possible that I might go a little deeper with a client than their unibrow or their snaggletooth, but your point is well taken, right? There's something about each of us, and it's made up of lots of things. It's made up of where we came from. Our upbringing is a big part of that. People who influenced us, coached us, inspired us, taught us. All those things start to shape who we are. They start to shape what we believe about ourselves, believe about the world. And as we develop a clear sense of, that who am I, the answer to that question, we have to find ways in which to make that connection with other people in a meaningful way. And if we don't, if we try to play it neutral, if we try to downplay that, right? If I'm not proud of the fact that I've got the Zeppelin shirt on and I'm still going to be at church tomorrow, and you got to figure out what to do with that, because that's not my problem. If I'm not comfortable in that, if I'm not comfortable on your podcast talking business, sports, and music surrounded by dead animals, like if I can't get comfortable with that, I can't be uniquely me. Now I'm trying too hard to fit in. Now I'm trying too hard to not offend. I'm taking away what allows me to contribute something meaningful to someone. And if I remember right, your hope was today we'd impact one person.
Yeah.
I don't know who that one person is. I don't know if I already know them. I don't know if you already know them. I don't know if they just randomly find this and listen. But if I hedge on what makes me uniquely me, I may not have that opportunity. And then that's a miss on me. So I have to help inspire those folks to realize if you're in a management leadership position, your job isn't to be liked by everybody. Your job is to be so clear on who you are and what you want and why you want it that you draw a real clear distinction between those that are passionate to follow you and those who are passionate to get out of the building as fast as they can. The last thing you want are lukewarm people on the team. Either be all in or be all out. And so for me, if I can help people think through that in their life, like if you're going to be married, be the best husband you can be. If you're going to be a coach of your kids' team, give it your all. How do we, and by the way, this is an interesting segue. When people use that term life balance, to me, this is the path in which I get them there is life balance isn't about giving everything equal attention. It's figuring out where are those areas where you can contribute something meaningful and letting go of the things that you're mediocre with. I learned this on the baseball field when I was coaching kids. I can't tell you how many times a dad would bring his kid out on the field at the beginning of the season, and you can figure this one out. Hey, my kid's going to play first base. Oh, okay, got it. Has he played first base before? No, but we've been working on it. He's ready. He wants it. So this is Dad's agenda. And you get Tim out there on the diamond, and you start hitting some grounders to him, and you realize, okay, at the soft ones, he's got them. Dad didn't lie. They've been working on it. But then a few sharp ones come his way, and Tim's back on his heels. And then a real bullet comes his way, and he's not darting for the ball, he's darting out of the way. And before you know it, you realize, hey, if we keep pushing Dad's agenda, guess where Tim ends up at the end of the season? Yeah, I hate baseball. This game sucks.
Terrified.
I don't want to play anymore. As a coach, I have to figure out what makes that kid uniquely him, because I love having him on the team, but I have to find a place he can fit. It doesn't mean we won't work on his growth. Doesn't mean we won't go back and coach him through how to get better. But just, working toward somebody else's agenda. And in life, if I'm working toward your agenda, hey, how can I make this so great for you that you don't get the best out of me? Well, then neither one of us get the best out of that situation. Tell me how I can be uniquely me and add so much value that I let go of the things that I don't need to hold on to, because I'm not really good at that. I laughed on the way in, like, hey, if you want to talk, loans, if you want to talk business, if you want to talk music, if you want to talk sports, I'm in. If you want to talk hunting, like, I've fired one shot in my life. It's fun to sit in here, but that's not my bag. So I don't want to pretend and, have you smoke me out as, dude, why did you waste our time on the podcast talking about something you know nothing about? You're not passionate about it.
I think you just nailed in a very eloquent way kind of why we do this. It gives us a platform to be who we are, uniquely us, and have people on that have passions too. And yeah, this is definitely not about hunting. This is about hunting for that success, and that definition is different to different people. People have their passions, and so it's just a fun way to explore.
By the way, this is not me trying to overplay that. I mean, you thanked Kristen up front for making sure we got the connection. It's exactly why I told her I love following your podcast, because that's exactly the vibe I get when I watch other episodes, is you guys are uniquely you, and you're owning that. You're not trying to live outside of it or too safe within it. You're just saying, hey, this is who we are.
It's a very hard thing to do. In fact, when we scheduled your podcast, I reached out to Patrick. I'm like, do you know Michael Regan? He's like, yeah, he's my coach. I'm like, okay. Well, we want to have him on. What do you think? Do you think there's any problem with having the museum? And he's like, dude, just be yourself. Stop trying to not polarize people. You just got to be yourself. And it was a hard decision to keep filming in here, because this can be a polarizing place to some people, but it's we like it, and this is us, and we're not going to apologize, and we want to be uniquely us. We want a platform where we can be ourselves, because I think what you were saying about the uniquely you is very important, but there's a line where you don't want to pass, because in your business, for me, because you don't want to polarize your audience too much. There's one real estate agent partner of mine that has a really successful business, extremely polarizing on Facebook with politics. Like, he's being himself. You know this guy, and he's being himself, but at what risk? And I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. Maybe he is polarizing all of one party's, all of his clients that are maybe hard leaning to the other side, but maybe he's growing his audience that agrees with him. So it's easy to stand by and go wince when you see a post that's so one way politically. It's not something I would do. That's my line, right? I would not integrate that into my business. I wouldn't use this as a conference room to host a client event. But where is that line?
See, I think you just actually had a really important example of why that is important, because where you draw that line is part of what's uniquely you. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I think the answer is the only thing that would be wrong would be him trying to pander
Something that wasn't him.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because now we're dealing with inauthenticity, and I'm sorry, but again, come to me hot or come to me cold. Come to me lukewarm, and I'm done. I don't want lukewarm.
So it's okay to check things at the door. I'm not going to bring this in my business, but don't fake.
Think about this in instead of this being high level or example, like just think about it. If every builder, realtor, past client, wherever your sources of business come from, even if you do some consumer direct, if everyone knew exactly who you were and what you did and how you did it, and it was so clear that they could say, that's exactly what I need, or that's not at all what I need, how much easier would the sales qualification process be? The reason we make it hard is we spend all this time trying to take every lead we get and bring them into our system. And how many times do we get a lead that goes ahead and fills out our application, goes ahead and submits all their financials, and it's this file that we all sit there and think, why did I say yes to this referral partner, to this deal? Look, there's an old Jim McMahon quote. Remember Jim McMahon? In the old Sales Mastery events, he was a common speaker from the stage. And I remember him quoting this phrase: there are enough people that want to do business the way I want to do business that I won't worry about the ones that don't. That stuck with me because that's him saying, I'm going to be uniquely me. And I understand, by definition, that divides the room. But I do that on purpose so I don't have to waste my time with a bunch of people that later are going to not really love what I do anyway. If I'm not clear enough about what my value proposition is, that's my fault. I've got to own that. I've got to be clear on what it is. And once I am, I accept the fact that not everybody needs to work with me. I look forward to a day when our Dodd-Frank world maybe comes back to the middle a little more. I'm not saying there wasn't a place for it at the time, but when we get back to a place where you can come to me with, your 800 FICOs and your 10 years of W-2 income and your super clean tax returns, and I can say, great, go to my 30 BIP express lane. Mm-hmm. Just go, because you don't need all of the other stuff I can provide you. Go to my express lane. But right now I can't tell you where to go, because that's me guiding, that's me picking who makes what and who gets charged what, and that's not the way the system is set up. But we need to get back to a place where we can have some common sense in this, because when we have common sense in those tracks, I can be uniquely me and say, I understand, you don't need my mortgage planning process.
Well, and there are a lot of people that are trying to not be uniquely you, maybe without knowing it, and it's almost like I could see how a coach would be so helpful to them, or companies, or different industries, because in our industry, we've seen people that go, I'm going to go after the Hispanic community, I'm going to go after the LGBTQ community, I'm going to go after this community. So they go out and they hire maybe an assistant or a loan officer that speaks Spanish, or they go out and they hire someone that's fits the LGBTQ community.
Right.
And they're going after all these other communities. And I'm thinking, one, that's not who you are. Two, why does it matter where your clients come from? And three, isn't that kind of offensive in a way that you're going to go after a certain group of people? It's like, just be who you are and go out and serve everybody. And I see companies do it.
For sure.
Orvis is a fly fishing company, and they did this whole big Me Too thing, and they were going hard after getting behind women into fly fishing. I'm all for that 100%. And they went after it so hard that they played this commercial on YouTube that was a call through the customer service line. It was a voicemail. And it was a client. It was a customer that said, I've been an Orvis supporter for years. I own all my Orvis stuff. I'm throwing it all away because you're going so political on this Me Too thing. And I fly fish to get away from that stuff, and you're bringing it into my passion. That's his opinion. I'm not saying right or wrong on the opinions, but here's a company that's going full forge on this thing to try to get a new customer base, that they kind of lost who they were. They were this traditional fly fishing, high-end, nerdy type of thing, for better or worse. But I kind of see companies trying to change who they're defining what they are uniquely, instead of just being themselves.
Yeah, it's difficult to sit here and wax philosophically about how to make the world a better place. Mm-hmm. But if I just start at a personal level and I own the idea that, look, it starts with me. I'm going to be I'm going to be true to who I am, what I believe. I'm going to live it out in authentic ways, because you're right. If I'm just being opportunistic,
yes,
hey, I'm going to go serve this community, versus being authentic. Who am I really passionate about, and why do I care about them? If I really do, dive in head first, be all in. I don't have a problem with targeting audiences, but make sure it comes from a place of passion, that word you used earlier. If it does, it allows you the opportunity to attach your passion to an opportunity, and it's not opportunistic. You're actually, I want to make a difference. That's way different than, I think I can exploit. I think I can take advantage of that. I think we can make some money there.
Yes.
And that's the line. If it's authentic versus opportunistic. When I talk about uniquely you with a client, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on how do we take the one thing that no one on this planet can compete with, your unique ability. How do we discover that? We take them through standout. If you've read Marcus Buckingham, I'll take them through a standout assessment to help them identify it. Because for some people, it's hard to see themselves. They don't. They have a different voice going on in their head with a different narrative that sometimes inhibits their ability to see what really does make them special. So I try to help them get an outside view. Sometimes I take them through an exercise where we connect with other people in their sphere of influence who speak into that for them. They tell them, hey, here's what I see in you. Here's why I care about working with you. Here's why I'm committed to this relationship we have, so that they can hear those words, see those words, and identify clearly with where are those themes that make them uniquely them. Once we have that, then we at least have a decision. Are we going to do something with this? If you're going to, hide your lamp under a bowl, that's a bummer, because the world there might be that one person, just your mission for today, that needed what you were going to bring. So that's a bummer if you hide it. But if you live it out, it's true. Not everybody will care. But we already know that's going to be true even if you try to be opportunistic. So why not live authentically and be all in, be passionate, and go contribute in a meaningful way where maybe you can make a difference in the real estate community, in your real community, in your home, in your business. Find a way and be uniquely you. That's my passion with that process.
I really like wrapping up kind of the business side of this conversation with that. I think it's beautiful in its own way. I'm gonna transition away from business. Before I do, Ryan, do you have anything you wanted to add to any of that?
I think just coming off that last statement, I was just going to say it reminded me of, we had a few quirky loan officers that we were working with, and they didn't necessarily fit in with kind of our team vibe. And Cody and I were like, ooh, like, what do we do here? And I don't remember who said it to you, but they basically just gave us the advice, like, there's somebody out there that is looking for a loan officer just like that. There's another quirky realtor or a quirky referral partner that's looking for somebody like that. And it really kind of just opened up our eyes to say, all right, that person's uniquely them, for better or for worse. And there's probably somebody out there that's looking just for that match, and like, more power to them.
And I want to give that person credit. That was Jeff Strode with Finance America who said that to me. And
Nice.
he said there's a customer out there for everybody, and that's a really good point. Okay, I'm going to ask you one question. It'll be easy to answer, music related. The other one, I'm going to take a risk at sounding like a moron. Okay, ready?
Wow, I'm excited.
So, top 5 albums, Desert Island. Deserted Island. There's no islands in the desert.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Deserted.
if a desert is defined by rainfall, it's possible that there is a desert island. Okay, so let's just be clear on this. I hate this question because, I want to bring the whole collection. I really struggle with the desert island question, but let's boil it down. We talked earlier about Led Zeppelin, and Zeppelin 2 for me is clearly an album that I never get tired of. Launched the year I was born, and it's still just as good. If we talked about Van Halen earlier, lots of epic albums, but for me, the bar was set with Van Halen 1. That could be the greatest debut hard rock album of all time. It's a classic.
How much time do we got?
All right, make note. We'll come back. Don't give me your Guns N' Roses.
Okay.
All right. Once you get past those two, gosh, I can mix in a lot of records there, but let's just be true to a few. I'm a huge fan of Deep Purple. So I'm going to go Made in Japan because I get a lot of great songs on there, and it's a classic live album.
When you talked about our shirts, that was the band that was missing from,
It's the triad, yeah. They are that is absolutely true. Just like in the 60s, you had the Beatles, the Stones, and the Who. It's Zeppelin, Sabbath, and Purple. So I would definitely go there. While we're talking live albums, let me go off the beaten track. One that you guys probably don't know, but a great British band from the 70s called UFO, Michael Schenker.
R.I.P. They just lost.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. Paul Raymond just passed about 2 weeks ago, 73, and that'll be a big loss for them. They are on their last run. But I would go, again, to Strangers in the Night. I mean, just a classic UFO album. Probably one. And then if we're going to just say, okay, we'll throw some melodic rock in there somewhere. You got to have something that's great. I don't know how you beat Boston's first album when it just comes to, I mean, More Than a Feeling, Long Time, Foreplay, all classics. I would certainly not be disappointed to listen to those 5 albums for the rest of my life.
Good selections. Some shockers in there.
You probably have a few others.
Yeah, definitely. But I want to get to this risky question I have.
All right.
It sounded like a moron. Same question, but not a deserted island. Someone took away all of your books, all of your podcasts, all of your motivational seminars. They took all that away, and all you have to rely on for motivation, business development, all that stuff that we thrive on was music. What would be the top 5 albums?
Wow. So
Is that too deep?
The music has to inspire in ways that I have no other access to. All right, so Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime.
Ooh.
Because that's going to keep you in the game for a long time. As long as we're going to stay progressive. I'm going to go with Dream Theater's self-title from 2013. I think that will also keep the sword sharp if you've got to keep your brain in motion. I don't know how you ever really avoid the Beatles in this question because they kind of have a root to a lot of this great stuff that I love. So I'm gonna pick up a copy of Rubber Soul if I'm gonna be in that equation. And then I'm going to jump into Pink Floyd because if I've got animals in my collection, I can be a happy man because some deep thought comes from some great songs on that record. Have I hit 4 or 5? Am I close?
I think that's 5. I think that's 5.
Because I was going to give you one last one.
Go ahead.
Because I think Genesis, if I go back to early 70s Genesis, like in a time when Selling England by the Pound was on the charts, that would be my 5th. I think that's 5.
That's great. Those are the only one we share on the first question was Led Zeppelin 2 for sure. And then for me, Animals is my favorite Pink Floyd album, but I think Dark Side of the Moon I would have to have on there. One of my favorite interviews is when David Gilmour's talking about his guitar style, and he says it's the space between the notes that make the music. You know, I nerd out on that stuff, and I find analogies all the time in music.
So it's funny you say that. So Gilmour, obviously one of my favorite guitarists of all times, a guitarist that often gets thrown into a different genre altogether because the songs they write became way more popular. But that the two guys that have that tone that just emotionally grabs me, Gilmour and Neil Schon. I mean, there is something about a Neil Schon guitar solo that is just, I mean, the whole concept in the 70s of leaving that Santana band to go on a journey, and that's where that band name came from. Those two guitarists emotionally,
For sure.
take me down that road.
Yeah, very underappreciated guitarist.
I think that's fair.
And then what's the Megadeth album that has Foreclosure of a Dream on it? Is it?
Well, the Symphony of Destruction's on that album too. Yeah.
It was. I can't remember the name of the album, but that would be on my list. And then probably 2112 would be on my personal development
So
list.
I just went out and bought the 40th anniversary of Hemispheres so I could get all 3 discs. And yes, I did say discs. I do still buy that. Yeah, Rush. See, this is why this game gets hard.
Yeah.
I mean, like I want to edit already. Yeah.
Well, and for those of you who like music and inspirational stuff in music, the documentary that came out a couple years ago on Rush is amazing. They go behind Neil Peart's whole story of losing his family and going on his road and then coming back to the band. And what's the guitar player's name?
Alex Lifeson.
Alex Lifeson. And their stories are so cool, and there's so much to get out of there about overcoming adversity. And we had a short conversation about Dave Mustaine, but
By the way, you meant Countdown to Extinction.
yes, thank you.
I didn't want to interrupt you earlier,
No, that's
but I knew where you were going.
I don't own a Megadeth T-shirt, and I'm not going to buy one until I see them live. And it's the last band on my bucket list. They were coming with Ozzy, and that show got canceled. For health reasons.
Ozzy needs a little bit of time off.
Yeah, but someday. Thank you so much for coming on.
Happy to be here.
We also talked about we wanted this to be worth 3 hours of our Saturday of Ryan in his baseball and taking our time away from our family, and it absolutely was. You have an open seat. Come on anytime. How can people get a hold of you and reach out to you? Building Champions social media.
buildingchampions.com is certainly how you can get a hold of us at our website. I have a Coach Michael Regan Facebook page. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And if you email me, it's michael@buildingchampions.com. And always happy to have a conversation. I don't ever pitch coaching. I just want to help people. And sometimes helping them means we coach. Sometimes it just means giving them some help. And so I'm always happy to hear from people.
Well, great. I think we were going to get more than one today off the content you brought. The Hunt for Success podcast.com. Subscribe our YouTube page. Follow us on iTunes, Instagram, all the social media. And we got a grip of really compelling guests coming up. So we look forward to for this summer. So thanks again, Michael. Ryan, we'll see. You got something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're watching this and you have guests that you know that we don't know that you need to put us in contact with, that would be awesome. Just leave it in the comments, private message us on Instagram or Facebook. Just shoot us a message, and we'd be more than happy to look into it.
All right, everybody, go get it. We'll see you next time.
All right,
Thanks,
we're
guys.
out.
Thank you.